The morning light spills in gently through the cracks in the shutters, soft and silver. You've been awake for a while now, listening to the rooster's call from 2 houses over and the distant clatter of someone drawing water from the well. Your bed is rough-stuffed linen laid atop straw, and when you rise, your bones complain softly, but you're used to the sound. The rushes on the floor crunch under your bare feet. You meant to sweep them yesterday, but the hours passed faster than you expected, and today, well, there's always today. You pull your shawl tighter and step to the hearth, coaxing the ashes until a low flame flickers back to life. The warmth is thin, but welcome. Outside, the earth is damp. Dew clings to the edges of your skirts as you stoop to gather the early herbs. Yarrow, maybe a bit of sweet woodruff, though it's growing sparse this season. Your basket is already lined with a clean scrap of cloth, its edges stitched by your own hands. You hum as you work, quietly, just for yourself. This has always been your way, simple, predictable. Not quite poor, but certainly not important. You know the names of the plants and how to draw a salve from roots. You've helped with births and more than once whispered prayers over dying lips. Sometimes they thanked you, sometimes they looked away. The goat bleats as you pass by her pen, old Molly, nose nudging the gate for attention. You run your hand along her coarse fur and smile. She's been with you longer than some neighbors have. There's a comfort in these patterns, these rituals of small care. You've survived this way for years, quietly, softly, without needing much, and certainly without causing harm, but lately, things feel different. At first it was only glances. A pause in conversation when you entered the church. A quick crossing of oneself, even though you'd barely made eye contact. You chalked it up to old gossip, or perhaps your skirts trailing a little too much mud after the rain. Then came the day the baker's child fell ill, fevered, they said, speaking nonsense in the night. And someone asked, out loud, if perhaps he'd eaten something wrong, something touched, something cursed. You had passed by their home just the day before, carrying herbs. You hadn't even noticed the child. And yesterday you missed church, only once. The weather had turned your joints to aching, and the firewood needed chopping. You lit your own candles, said your prayers at the hearth. That used to be enough. But now you see them. The whispers that hush when you approach, the way they smile too tightly, too briefly. The way children are pulled a little closer when you walk past. You try not to let it reach your heart. You focus on the work, the drying herbs hanging from your beams. The patch of garden behind your home, though it's mostly onions and tansy this year. Your hands are always busy, plucking, grinding, kneading. You can still feel the shape of your mother's hands guiding yours years ago, showing you how to bind a poultice. She was a strong woman, stern but fair, and she always warned you, don't stand out, don't speak too boldly, don't be too much. You wonder now if she was afraid even then. If she saw what you now feel in the pit of your stomach, that something has shifted, and once it begins, it's hard to stop. Your hands are rough from years of labor, your back bowed by bending over pots and herbs and tired women in childbirth. You don't dress in bright colors, you don't go to the alehouse. You haven't spoken harshly to anyone, you've done everything right. Haven't you? But it doesn't matter. The world has a way of changing its mind. There are fewer people who knock on your door for help now. And when they do, they don't linger. They take the salve, the tincture, the balm for their mother's cough, and they leave the coin on the ledge instead of in your hand. They used to thank you. Now they nod, tightly, eyes already turning away. At night the silence feels heavier. The wind that once comforted you now whispers strange things beneath the eaves. You light your candle, and it flickers for a moment before settling. You think of the faces that used to smile at you in the market, of the midwife who once told you your hands were blessed, and you wonder, how quickly can a blessing become a curse? You never thought you'd be feared for surviving, for knowing too much, for simply being alone, but here you are. And the ground feels a little less steady beneath your feet. The sky is still wide, the seasons still turn, and the herbs still bloom in the places they always have. But something in the village has shifted, just a little, like a table leg that's come loose, like a shadow in the corner of your eye. You don't know when the first true accusation will come, but you feel it, like a cold draft through a closed window. And so you work, you chop, you stir, you sow, you keep to your own path. You listen more than you speak. You watch the children play from afar. You light your candles at dusk and whisper your prayers without raising your voice. Because what else can you do? This is still your life. These are still your hands. You are not a danger. You are not a witch. You are a woman, alone, capable, surviving, and in this small, shifting world that might be enough. Or it might be too much. Have you ever wondered how easily a quiet life could be shattered by suspicion? Feel free to reflect in the comments below. Or share this story with someone curious about forgotten lives. You weren't born a witch. You were born into a world of dirt floors and quiet prayers, of aching winters and short, sweet summers. A world where every child's survival felt like a miracle and every bellyful of food was hard-won. A world where women stitched the world together quietly by firelight with calloused fingers and whispered hymns. But somehow, somewhere along the way, they started to look at you differently. And eventually they found the word that would explain their fear, which, it's a small word, really, whispery, sharp at the edges. It doesn't feel dangerous when it first arrives. It drifts in like wood smoke, barely noticed. But you come to learn that it sticks to things, to people, to your name, to your shadow. It's not just you, of course, there are others. The widow who lives with 3 cats and no husband. The girl who speaks her mind too boldly. The midwife who helps too many babies survive. The healer who knows the names of roots and where they sleep beneath the frost. The ones who are old or young or clever or strange. And always the ones who are alone. There were times, in better days, when people respected that knowledge, when they needed it, when you were called wise, helpful, godly, even, but that was before the winds began to shift. Before the new priest came to town with a red leather book and eyes that didn't blink enough. Before the whispers of devils and demons began crawling into sermons. Before the landowners raised taxes and the rain refused to fall and someone had to be blamed. It's strange how much fear thrives in hunger. The world outside your village, the world beyond the river, the hills, the distant cities was changing too. The printing press had spread, and with it words no one could unsay. Pamphlets, tracts, warnings. Warnings about women like you. Warnings about witches hiding in plain sight. And somewhere in Germany or France or England a man had written a book. The Hammer of Witches, they called it. Malleus Maleficarum, heavy in the hand, heavy with certainty. It told people how to spot a witch, how to test her, how to make her confess. And people believed it. They wanted to believe it. Because it gave them answers. Answers to pain, to loss, to the unknowable. You read none of it, of course. You couldn't read. Few women could. But you saw its echo in the faces of the men who came to your door. In the fear that crept into the corners of a mother's eyes when you laid hands on her fevered child. You remember how quickly a simple woman may be a healer? Maybe a widow? Maybe just someone unfortunate enough to live on the edge of town could become other? And once someone is other, they are never safe again. The people who feared you were not cruel, not at first. They were scared. Scared of famine, of sickness, of failure. They needed to believe there was a cause, a person, a name, because that's easier than chaos. Easier than accepting that crops fail, or children die, or dreams sour for no reason at all. So they gave their fear a shape, and it looked like you. You try to remember when the word first brushed your name. Maybe it was after you helped the magistrate's wife deliver her 4th child. You saved the baby, but the mother bled too much and never truly healed. You tried your best. But the wound festered and the pain clung to her like a fog. And when she finally passed on a winter morning, there were too many eyes on you. Or maybe it was years earlier when a cow collapsed in the field, and a boy swore he saw you walking past with a basket of nightshade in your arms. You weren't, you were home, boiling linen. But the story was too tempting, or maybe it was nothing, maybe it was only time. Time and fear and the slow curling vine of suspicion. Because to be a woman alone was already enough. To be a woman with knowledge, that was more than enough. You think about the other women, the ones who went before. The ones whose names have already been lost. Some confessed. Some didn't. Some vanished. Some burned. And all of them started like you, with nothing but calluses and quiet knowledge, and the wrong person watching them at the wrong time. You remember stories your grandmother told by the fire, tales of wise women? Hedge witches. Midwives who whispered to the moon and blessed the birthing bed. She said they weren't evil, they were needed. But even then they lived carefully. Soft voices, eyes lowered. Never too much laughter, and yet... Still, the stories always ended with a knock at the door. There is a loneliness that comes with being feared. A chill that never quite leaves your bones. Even when the hearth is full and the soup simmers gently, you feel it. Like a cold hand resting just behind your neck. You think of the word witch and how far it has wandered from its old meanings. Once it meant wise, cunning, connected to nature. Now it means danger. Now it means evil. Now it means you. You weren't born a witch. But you became one in their eyes the moment you didn't fit neatly in your place. You've known since girlhood that there are rules, invisible, unspoken ones. You mustn't be too loud. Or too quiet. Too beautiful or too plain. Too clever or too slow. You must marry young, bear children, keep to the church, and never know more than a man. You broke more than one of those rules. Not on purpose, but simply by living. And now, the weight of that is pressing in. You still tend your herbs. You still hum your old songs. You still wake early, feed the goat, sweep the hearth, and whisper your prayers. But there's a silence between the branches now. A stillness that wasn't there before, as though the forest itself is waiting to see who speaks your name next. Waiting to see if the whispers will grow teeth. Sometimes you wonder what would have happened if you'd been born a man, or born into a richer house, or born with the gift of disappearing, of blending, of pleasing. Would they still have found you? Or would you have gone unnoticed, safe beneath the crowd? But you were born as you are. With these hands, this mind, this heart, and they see it, and they fear it. If you've ever felt judged for being different, you're not alone, even across centuries. If this resonates, consider subscribing for more calm, reflective journeys into the past. At first, it was just the goats. You woke to silence. That's what told you something was wrong. Normally, they bleated at the first light of dawn, pestering you for food as you stepped out with your bucket. But that morning, the air was still. The sky was bruised with cloud, and the ground was soaked from a night of rain. When you reached the pen, they were already gone. All three of them, their bodies still, eyes wide and strange. No wounds, no sign of a fox or sickness. Just gone as though something had taken the breath right out of them in the night. You buried them in the back corner of your little patch of land. Said a prayer, told yourself sometimes animals just die, but still, it didn't sit right. And neither did the way the neighbor's boy stared at you as you carried the spade back toward the shed. You didn't think too much of it then. But a few days later, the child 2 doors down, the one you helped deliver not a year ago, took ill. A high fever, shaking limbs. His mother said he screamed your name in the night, cried out that the old woman with the herbs had come for him in his dreams. You hadn't seen the boy in weeks. You said nothing. But the mother didn't meet your eyes the next time you passed her in the lane. She crossed herself when she saw you and pulled the child closer to her chest. A week after that, the smith's wife threw salt at your feet as you walked by. It's strange how quickly things turn. How quickly a single bad harvest or a dead goat or a sick child can be gathered up and pressed into a shape that looks like blame. And when people want to blame someone, they don't look for the powerful, they look for the quiet ones. The ones who won't fight back. The ones who are already a little apart. Like you, it wasn't always like this. You remember when neighbors brought you gifts after a birth, when they sought your advice, praised your remedies? But now they look through you, past you. Or worse, at you with a tightness around the mouth, a look that says they've already decided something they want to admit out loud. You try to keep living as you always have. You sweep the floors, tend the herbs, patch the same pair of stockings that's been thinning for 3 winters. You keep to yourself. You avoid the market. You kneel in the back row at church. But suspicion is a slow-moving tide, and once it begins to rise, there's no holding it back. Then comes the knock on the door. Not a friendly knock, not even a demanding one, just a slow, deliberate rhythm. You open it to find two men, one from the village council, the other from the church. They don't smile. They don't ask to come in. They tell you, plainly, that some concerns have been raised. Nothing formal. They say just questions. Had you been seen near the river the night before the boy's fever began? Why did your goats die when no others did? Can you recite the Lord's Prayer without stumbling? You answer quietly, carefully. You keep your hands folded, your eyes low. You feel the sweat prickling at your back even though the air is cold. They leave after a few minutes. No charges, no punishment. But the silence after they go is louder than any accusation. The next day, someone carves a small mark on your door. You don't know what it means, but it feels like an omen. The day after that, a woman in the market drops her basket when you walk past. She says nothing, just leaves the fruit scattered and backs away. The whispers begin in earnest then. You hear them before you see them, in the churchyard, at the well. Children repeating things they don't understand. Grown men crossing themselves when you pass by. You try not to react. You gather your firewood, you boil your water. You speak to no one unless spoken to, but suspicion doesn't require proof. It only needs repetition. One neighbor says you have a strange look in your eyes. Another says they saw you talking to yourself by the river. Someone else says they saw a cat leave your house at midnight. Not a black one, just a cat. But the story grows with each telling. No one mentions the time you nursed their mother through fever, or helped a woman survive childbirth, or gave away food to a family whose crop had failed. That isn't the kind of story that spreads. Soon the questions come again, more formal this time. You are called to the meeting house. Asked to stand before the elders, you recognize their faces. You've shared meals with their wives, mended clothes for their children. But now, they look at you like a puzzle they're trying to solve. They ask about your herbs, your routines, your cat, your dreams. Have you ever felt something unnatural? Have you ever spoken with someone who wasn't there? Has the devil ever offered you comfort in the night? You say no. Of course you say no. But your voice feels too thin, too brittle. And you can see in their eyes that it doesn't really matter what you say. One of them writes something down in a ledger. The scratching of the quill makes your skin crawl. You leave the meeting house with your heart pounding in your chest, but your face calm. You've learned not to show fear. But inside, something begins to fray. You don't sleep well that night. Every creak of the wind against the shutters sounds like a footstep. Every silence feels full of waiting. And then, one morning, two more names are added to the whispers, two other women. Both older, one is blind, the other used to be a midwife. You see the same look in their eyes that you see in your own reflection. That dull, stunned disbelief that things could come to this. You talk to no one, you pray, you wait. But waiting doesn't help. Because the thing about a rumor is that it grows. It blooms in the cracks between truth and fear. And when enough people repeat it, even those who once trusted you begin to wonder. Even your own hands start to look suspicious. You stare at them sometimes, wondering how they became so dangerous. You still haven't done anything wrong. But that isn't what matters. What matters is that people are scared. The crops were poor this year. A traveling preacher spoke of judgment. A baby died. The cows gave no milk. Someone's chimney collapsed. And you were seen just nearby, close enough. You can feel the moment they decide it's you. It doesn't take proof. Only fear. What would you have done in her shoes? Would you have spoken up? Or stayed silent? Let us know your quiet thoughts below. You don't remember the moment it became official. There was no dramatic declaration, no bell tolling in the square. Just another knock, firmer this time, and a parchment sealed with wax. They handed it to you without meeting your eyes, a summons. You knew what it meant. The town doesn't call you unless it's already decided something. They told you to appear at the chapel 2 mornings from now. Not to prepare anything, not to bring anyone, just yourself. The day before, you swept the floor twice, though it was already clean. You trimmed the ends of your dried sage. You whispered a prayer to your mother, not to protect you, exactly, but to keep you steady. The morning arrives cold. The sky is pale and sickly, the kind that promises rain but never delivers it. You walk the path alone. People pretend not to notice, but they do. You feel their eyes through the slits in their shutters. A child peeking around a doorway, the butcher turning away too quickly. Even the chickens seem quieter this morning. The chapel smells like wax and old wood. The floor creaks as you enter. 3 men sit at a table that seems too tall. Behind them, a single candle sputters in its dish. One man, the one from the church, greets you by name. He doesn't smile. He motions for you to stand in the middle of the room. You do. They ask you to state your name, your place of birth, and whether you believe in God. You answer plainly. They nod. Then come the real questions. Have you ever spoken to spirits? Do you feel power in your hands when you touch others? Have you felt urges, unnatural ones? They ask whether you've been touched by the devil in your sleep, whether you dream in strange colors, whether you have a mark anywhere on your body that does not bleed when pricked. You say no, you say it quietly. You try to make your voice as small and reasonable as possible. They look at each other. They ask if you would be willing to let a midwife examine you. You pause. They don't like that you pause. You agree. What else can you do? The midwife arrives the next morning, escorted by 2 men. You recognize her. You once gave her rosemary for her joints. She doesn't speak as she works. Her hands are cold. She checks your arms, your back, your feet. She peers closely at a freckle on your hip. She marks it down. They say it might be a witch's teat. You want to laugh, not because it's funny, but because it's so far beyond sense that laughter is all that remains. You don't. The next day, they take you to the river, a test, they say. Nothing dangerous, just old tradition. They tie your hands, weigh your skirts with stones. They say if you float, it means the devil keeps you aloft. If you sink, it proves your innocence. You try to speak, but your mouth is dry. The villagers watch from the hill, not many, but enough. They lower you into the cold water. It is worse than you imagined. The shock of it steals the breath from your lungs. The ropes bite into your wrists. You sink quickly, deeper than you thought you would. Your lungs burn before they pull you back up. They say nothing. They dry you off, give you bread, send you home. But something shifted now. You are no longer the subject of whispers. You are the subject of process. The trial is announced the next week. Not a trial, really, more of an inquiry, an examination. They ask others to come forward, anyone with memories, with suspicions, with stories, and they come. The old man whose dog barked at your fence. The girl who swears you looked through her once and gave her a chill. A woman who says her dreams have turned dark since you gave her fennel tea. None of it is true. Or rather, none of it matters whether it's true. The words fall into place, and together they begin to sound like something, like guilt, like smoke. And soon someone will say, where there's smoke, there's fire. You don't try to argue. You know it would do no good. No one asks what you've endured. No one counts the lives you've helped, the pain you've soothed, the years you've given without thanks. They ask only what fits the shape they've already chosen. You begin to drift. Not physically, but inwardly. There is a moment when the mind, in its kindness, begins to blur the edges of things. You see the men in their chairs, but you don't quite hear them. You feel the scratch of the rope at your wrists, but it's distant, like it belongs to someone else. They ask again if you've spoken with Satan. You say no. They ask if you will confess. You say nothing. They tell you that confession brings mercy. You do not ask, mercy from whom? They list the names of the others who confessed, as though it should be comfort. As though a chorus of false words would make yours easier to speak, you remain silent. And in your silence, you realize something strange. There is a power in not giving them what they want, even if it changes nothing. Even if the ending is the same, you do not confess. You do not accuse. You do not explain. You simply remain yourself, quiet, still, and unbroken in ways they can't quite understand. They write more things in their ledgers. You see the pages pile up, your name at the top, your life in short, spidery sentences, the quill scratches. The candle smokes. You are dismissed, but not released. You sleep now in a room beneath the chapel. They say it is for your own protection. There is straw on the floor, a small blanket, a jug of water. You eat what they give you. You wake at every sound. The women who visit you, other accused, speak in whispers. Some have confessed, some cry, some simply sit in silence. You listen to their breathing. You wonder if this is what your mother feared all those years ago when she taught you how to live small, how to live safe. You did everything right, and still it wasn't enough. No answer you give can save you. The moment they ask the question, you've already lost. If this story stirs something in you, a quiet rage or silent grief, you read not alone. You can follow for more histories that don't often get told. It takes time to notice you're not alone. The walls are thick, the door is heavy, and the silence feels like a living thing. For the first day, you hear only the scrape of bowls on stone, the rustle of rats in the straw. But on the second night, as the wind hisses through the cracks in the chapel stones, you hear something else. A voice. It's barely above a breath, coming from beyond the wall, cracked and hoarse. You press your ear to the cold stone. She's not the first, it says, nor the last. A pause, then a soft hum like a lullaby half remembered. Then nothing. The next day, when they bring your bread, you notice the crust is torn oddly on one side. Inside, pressed between the folds, is a single dried lavender bud. Someone remembers what you are. Someone remembers you were a healer. And slowly, others begin to appear. Not in person at first, but in whispers in the signs left in straw, in a piece of twine braided with thistle tucked beside your bowl. One night, a new figure is lowered into the cell beside yours, a woman. Her hands are ink-stained, her hair gray. You say nothing. She does not look at you for hours. But as the candle guttering on the far wall begins to die, she turns and says, "They say I named my cat after the devil. That's my sin." You glance over. She smiles, just barely. His name was Buttons. You both laugh, a sound more like breathing than joy, but it is something. That night you sleep more deeply. Over the next week, the space shifts. Others are brought in. One walks with a limp. Another clutches a rosary even in sleep. One barely speaks, but hums to herself when nervous. They call you witches. But here, in the dark, you're just women, bruised, tired, human. There's something sacred about the way you begin to share. You pass along small stories in the quiet hours, memories like threads of lost children, of once green gardens, of how to stop a wound from festering, how to birth a baby sideways, how to read the sky by the flight of crows. No one teaches you this, you just do it. Someone remembers how to weave rushes into floor mats. Another knows how to make tea from bark. You trade knowledge not as power, but as a way of saying, I see you, I believe you. Sometimes one of you disappears. Taken out, not brought back. You don't ask questions. You light a crumb of candle in their memory. You whisper their name into the crack between the stones. Some confess. You don't blame them. Sometimes it's for their children's sake. Sometimes it's because they cannot stand another night in this shrinking place. Sometimes they believe, if only for a moment, that mercy might still be real. You never judge. You only grieve. There's one woman, younger than the rest, who presses your hand one morning and says, "If they take me today, remember that I sang to my baby with a cracked voice and a soft heart. I was never a witch, I was just tired. You do remember." Her name is Agnes. She smells like time and sadness. And when she is gone, you place a sprig of dry leaves beneath your blanket for her. You make room in your memory for all of them. They begin to live there, quietly, like the hum of bees. Their stories are yours now, too. Sometimes you dream of open fields, of bare feet in warm dirt, of laughter too loud to be polite. You dream of circles of women, old, young, crooked, singing, not casting spells, just surviving. You wake with tears on your cheeks, but not from fear, from the strange and unexpected warmth of being known. Because even now, marked, imprisoned, accused, you found something, a kind of sisterhood, not born of blood or name, but of fire, of silence, of stubborn, aching life. They said you were monsters. But here, in the dark, you are only women, holding on to one another like embers in ash. If you're still listening, you've joined this quiet circle too. Consider commenting with a thought or feeling you'd like to share. There's no surprise when the sentence is spoken. You're not sure when you first knew it would come to this. Perhaps when they asked you if you could recite the Lord's Prayer without stammering, or when they looked too long at the mole on your shoulder. Or maybe it was the moment your name was written down, not in conversation, not in warning, but in ink. Ink that dries permanent on rough paper. You are to be put to death. The method doesn't matter much, whether it's the noose or the water or the fire. The truth is that your life has already been taken from you. This is only the final chapter. You feel strangely calm, as though this moment belongs to someone else. You listen to them speak, the magistrate in his long robes, the murmurs in the gallery, the scribes scratching away, but their words fall away, meaningless. Like listening through a wall. Instead, your attention goes elsewhere, to the sun through the window pane, to a smudge of soot in the corner of the ceiling, to the ache in your wrists from where they were bound too tightly for too long. When they ask if you have any final words, your mouth opens, then closes again. You have said everything worth saying already. They would not hear you now. When the day comes, it begins quietly. They come before dawn, as though hoping the shadows might soften the truth of what they're doing. They don't meet your eyes. You walk between them, barefooted, wrists bound. Your breath is steady, and each step feels both dreamlike and too real. A bell tolls somewhere. A slow, low sound that echoes through the morning mist. The streets are lined already. People who once nodded to you in the lane now avert their gaze. Some watch with morbid curiosity, others with something like sorrow. A child clutches her mother's hand. You think she's about the age your niece would have been. Someone spits, someone crosses themselves, you walk on. The air smells of damp straw and iron. Somewhere a cart creaks. Someone whispers a prayer. A rooster crows, and the sound is absurd in its ordinariness. Even now, the world continues. You glance up. The sky is the softest gray blue, the kind that means rain might come by evening. You try to remember what the earth will smell like afterward. Wet and green. They say this is about salvation, that by purging evil, they are protecting the souls of the good. They say that your death will be a cleansing, but you know better. You were never dangerous. You were only alone, only knowledgeable, only inconvenient. They could not bend you, so they chose to break you. At the edge of the square, a platform waits, or the bank of the river, or the hilltop where they bury outcasts. Each place serves the same purpose, not just to kill, but to be seen killing, to send a message. They tie your hands again, though you make no move to resist. You want to look brave. But mostly you want it to be over. You hear the wind stir the trees nearby. The rustle of leaves. You hear the name of God spoken over you, not as comfort, but as sentence. You whisper your own name in return softly, just to yourself, so you can hear it one last time. There is a moment long and still when everything seems to pause. The crowd, the wind, the sky. You think of the women you met in the dark, the ones who hummed lullabies, who whispered herbs and names and prayers into the cracks of the stones. You think of Agnes, you think of Buttons the cat. You think of your mother's hands, you think of everything you once loved. Every ordinary, sacred piece of it, your garden, the feel of warm bread in your palms. The first snowfall each year, landing gently on the thatch. You do not think of the accusations. They were never real. You do not think of the fire. You think of lavender, and then it begins. Whatever comes next, you let it. And in those final moments, you are not afraid, because fear has burned away long ago. What remains is something else, something small and stubborn. A knowing you were never what they said you were. You were a woman. You lived. You listened to the wind in the trees. You healed where you could. You loved, though it hurt. You endured. And now, whatever else happens, you will not be forgotten. Not truly, because someone somewhere still asks why, still listens, still remembers. They said this would purify your soul. But you always knew your soul was never the problem. If you're still with us, thank you. These stories matter. You can share this with someone who carries quiet strength, just like she did. The fire has long gone cold. The crowd has scattered. The magistrate has gone home. Even the whispers have dulled, replaced by the steady rhythm of village life. Animals to feed, wood to stack, bread to bake. The square has been swept. The ash rained away in the last storm, but traces of you remain. They always do. The window shutters in your cottage swing softly in the wind. No one has claimed it, not yet. The door hangs open a little. Inside, your herbs still dry on the beam, curling in on themselves. Dust settles thick over your table. The cat is gone. Perhaps taken in by another, perhaps wandered away. Your garden overgrows, time pushing through the cracks, wild chamomile nodding its sleepy heads. Children dare each other to peer inside, just for a moment. To see the witch's house, they expect bones, jars of toads. Curses scratched into the walls, but it is only a house. Only a table and a bed, a wooden spoon left on the hearth, a cracked cup, the soft scent of lavender lingering still, as if it's too stubborn to forget you. And the town, it changes. Your name becomes a caution or a curiosity. Some speak it in hushed tones when illness comes. Others shake their heads and call it nonsense. The older women remember more clearly. They remember the ache in their bones you once soothed, the prayers you offered at their bedsides, the time you stayed up all night with a sick child. Some remember your laughter. They rarely speak it aloud. It's safer not to. But it lives in the way they gather dandelion root just as you taught them. In the way they murmur blessings under their breath when passing the old birch tree. In the recipe that still calls for a pinch of rue, though no one remembers why. Your sister, if you had one, still wears your shawl when the evenings turn cold. She keeps your journal in a drawer under a linen cloth. She doesn't open it much, but she can't bring herself to throw it away either. Not yet. The girls who saw you die, wide-eyed, gripping their mother's hands, grow older, they marry. They have children of their own, and sometimes late at night they think of you, not as a monster, but as a woman. A quiet woman who once lived among them. They wonder what it meant, why no one stopped it, whether they could have. But time moves onward, as it always does. Years pass, then centuries. Your village becomes a footnote in someone's thesis. The stone that marked your grave, if there was one, crumbles to lichen. Your name, once spoken in fear or pity, slips into silence, but not entirely. Because now, here, someone is listening. Someone is hearing your story again. Not as accusation or legend, but as memory, as life. You were not alone. Hundreds of thousands of women and men and children stood where you stood. Some burned, some drowned, some fled. Most vanished without names recorded. Their lives scrubbed out by the same hands that lit the flames, but history forgets imperfectly. Even the forgotten leave echoes. In the herbs still used in kitchens, in the lullabies still sung, in the fierce softness of women who keep each other warm in a cold world. You may be gone, but you are not silent. You echo in the soil, in the stories, in the questions we still ask. Why her? Why then? Why did we let it happen? And quietly in corners of the world, someone still lights a candle. Not because they knew you, but because they know what it means to be feared for standing alone. What it means to be seen too clearly, or not seen at all. What it means to survive something that wasn't meant to be survived. And so you linger. Not as a ghost, but as a question, as a quiet defiance. As a name remembered softly in the dark. Even in the dark, she held on to her name. And now, we sit together here, you and I, long after the ashes have cooled. Long after the crowd has gone home, and the wind has quieted its scolding. Perhaps you're lying down now, the weight of the day finally lifting from your shoulders. Perhaps the world outside your window is still. And in this stillness we remember her and all of them, not as witches, but as women, just women. Living quietly, loving stubbornly, surviving invisibly, they didn't ask for martyrdom. They asked for bread to rise, for wounds to close, for their children to be safe, for their bodies to be left in peace. And in return, they were watched, judged, punished. You see, the lines between past and present aren't always clean. Suspicion still clings to those who walk alone, to those who speak plainly, to those who know too much or ask too many questions. Even now, people are called strange for living in quiet ways, for being too tender or too bold. But there is something else that lingers too, resilience. That same root-deep strength that carried them, it didn't vanish with the last fire. It settled into the ground and rose again in others, in anyone who's ever been whispered about behind their back, in anyone who's ever been told they were too much or too little or simply wrong. It lives in you, perhaps. You, listening quietly in the dark. You, who've ever felt the weight of being misunderstood. Who've ever tended something fragile when no one else noticed. Who've ever stood a little apart from the crowd and wondered if that made you broken or just braver than you realized. There's room here for your story, too. You are part of this long, quiet lineage, not of curses and cauldrons, but of care, of watchfulness, of remembering, of survival. And in remembering them, these women who weren't witches at all, but healers, mothers, wanderers, sisters, dreamers, we begin to see the past more clearly. Not as a distant, cruel fairy tale, but as a mirror, a question. What do we do with fear? What do we do with difference? What stories do we choose to pass down? Because this isn't just about what was done to them. It's about what we choose to carry forward, what we leave behind, what we light candles for, even now. And maybe, just maybe, we light one for her. For the woman with the herb-stained fingers, the one who whispered comfort through the bars, the one who stood in court with dry lips and trembling hands, the one who didn't scream because she knew they wanted her to, the one who, even when no one believed her, still believed in something. Even in the dark, she held on to her name. And as you breathe now, slow, steady, safe, maybe you feel her near. Not as a ghost to fear, but as a thread that connects us. As a presence that reminds us that gentleness is not weakness. That silence is not surrender. That every name whispered in remembrance is a kind of spell, a reclaiming. So we whisper it again gently, for her, for them, for you. Rest now. You've wandered long enough through this story. Let it settle over you like a warm shawl. Let it become a quiet knowing in your chest. That history remembers more than it admits. That justice moves slowly, but stories can still light the path. And if you've stayed until now, until this very breath, thank you, truly, for listening.